First, he wanted to leave Barcelona, but now Lionel Messi has changed his mind, saying he's staying. Was he forced to make this U-turn? And what does Messi's dispute with his club tell us about footballers' contracts? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Kim Vinnell. Star footballer Lionel Messi has been forced to back down in his attempt to leave his lifelong football club, FC Barcelona. The Argentine ended weeks of speculation by announcing he's reluctantly decided to stay for one more season. Messi said he would see out his contract until next year to avoid taking the club to court. The player wanted to leave on a free transfer, but Barca and the Spanish league say he's bound by an $837 million buyout clause. Messi's decision doesn't end the dream for his fans back home in Argentina, though, who hope he'll one day return to his childhood club. Daniel Schweimler has more from Buenos Aires.
He's staying, but he wants to go. What the world of football wants to know is where. And while Lionel Messi's destination beyond next season remains unclear, the dream among fans around the world is that it will be their club.
It's been a difficult year. I suffered a lot in training, during the games and in the changing room. It made it very difficult, so I thought I'd leave the club in search of new objectives, a new environment, and a new experience for me.
Fans in Messi's home city Rosario are hoping he'll want to find those new experiences with his boyhood club, Newell's Old Boys.
Messi's coming to Newell's, the biggest club in Argentina. We've had Maradona here and now we should have Messi.
Leo deserves love. He's not had much space to play in his career. Newell's could give that to him.
But could the club he left when he was 14 years old afford a player earning a reported €500,000 a week? Money may not be the only incentive. The 33-year-old has always said his heart was in Rosario. He returned in 2018 to marry his childhood sweetheart, and the city certainly loves him. Although he's a footballing icon in this football-mad country, Lionel Messi left Argentina before he could play professional football. There are no memories of him here, no nostalgia, just a dream that one day soon he'll return home and the fans will be able to see his magic with their own eyes. Messi's eventual destination has been the hot topic in Argentina, a distraction from the pandemic. It's even drawn in the country's president. But is it a viable dream or a crazy fantasy?
Nobody can take away their illusion. I mean, they will have their illusion until Messi retires. It will be their desire to watch Messi playing with Newell's Old Boys shirt. So in that sense, they will keep their illusion until the end. This was not clearly the moment for Messi to come to Argentina and play for Newell's.
There's still hope that that moment will come. There's a tradition here of star players like Tevez and Veron returning to play for their boyhood clubs after making their fortunes in Europe. Leo Messi playing in Argentina in a Newell's Old Boys shirt? Not yet, but maybe one day. Daniel Schweimler, Al Jazeera, Buenos Aires.
All right, time to bring in our guests. From Sheffield in the UK is Rob Wilson, a football finance expert and head of Department of Finance, Accounting and Business Systems at Sheffield Business School. In Barcelona, we have Gemma Soler, a football reporter and presenter for Gol TV. And from London, Andrew Nixon, a sports lawyer and partner at Sheridans, that's a sports law group. Welcome to you all. Thank you for your time. So, turns out Lionel Messi, he's not leaving Barcelona after all. I'd like to start with you, Andrew. What do you think was his calculation? Was it the threat of a legal battle was just too much?
Yeah, I think there's probably two components. First of all, there's the desire or lack of desire not to have a legal battle with a club that has obviously done so much for him over the last 16 or 17 years. But also the reality is his legal case would have been on balance a weak one, as we understand that the contractual date written into the contract was June the 10th. Certainly in terms of the literal interpretation, obviously he has missed that date and is therefore time barred. one might be able to run arguments in relation to the arguable intention of the parties at the time the contract was made. So obviously there may be an argument in relation to intention around end of the season. But the reality is, if that June date was written into the contract, then he is to all intents time barred. That would certainly be the case under English law, and certainly my understanding is it would also be the case under Spanish law. I guess the second limb of any argument might revolve around whether or not the 700,000 buyout fee is abusive or might be deemed a penalty clause. The valuation of that, and Rob will no doubt speak to that in due course, but the valuation of that will no doubt be tied to his salary and the amount he was paid. But equally, there's an argument that a player with 1 year left on a contract at his age, attracting a buyout fee at that level may arguably be disproportionate. But I don't think he would get over the first name in any event. So I suspect that would be academic.
Was it 700,000 or was it 700 million?
Sorry, 700 million, yeah.
That's right, that's what I thought. I mean, just a phenomenal amount of money. Gemma, I'd like to come to you. Just tell us why it is that Messi wants to leave. Is it all just about the silverware?
Well, it's been quite an unpleasant year for Lionel Messi, with this story that started 20 years ago, this relationship that it was like a fairy tale before the last few years, because this brilliant football youngster player in Argentina, he had this medical disease, he needed money. In Argentina, no club would help him. His father finds Barcelona, Barcelona helps, brings him in Barcelona in 2000 with only 13 years old. And then he emerges as the best player in the world nowadays, and the only player who has been able to be more than a decade in this level. And he wins everything individually, collectively. So everything seemed like perfect. But the last few years, he had many troubles with the board of members of this club, of FC Barcelona. He was unhappy because he thought the team was not competitive enough. He asked for the re-signing of Neymar. This didn't happen. And then many things happened economically in the way quite unprofessional this board of members has been driving the team, with not having enough money to buy players, and with sport taking decisions that he was not very happy with, and the things didn't work in the field. So they have 3 shameful defeats in Europe in a row: in Rome 3 years ago, in Liverpool last year, and the worst defeat, the 2-8 in Lisbon. So he was unhappy, and he wanted to spend his last competitive years being in a team where he felt happy, where he felt he could still win. So that decision made him take that decision to go to that clause that, according to him, according to the lawyers that have assessed him, he told yesterday in the interview that he was telling the president during this year, I want to leave. I'm not happy. I want to use this clause. And the president will tell him, we will talk at the end of the season. We will talk at the end of the season. So that clause that Andrew said, the 10th of June, he interpreted that meant the end of the season. This was an exceptional season because of the COVID, and that ended in August. So he tried to execute that clause. The club was not happy with this. They say they stick to the 10th of June, and this divorce eventually will not be happening, and he will be staying 1 more year.
Things are pretty ugly, nevertheless. And he said, you know, he does still want to leave, but he's going to stay for another season. Rob, where will he go when he does finally leave? We heard earlier Newell's Old Boys in Argentina, you know, holds the dream of having him back, but in reality, who can afford him?
I think the really interesting thing about the Lionel Messi situation is that it's perhaps not as big an economic argument as we might have once thought, because of his age. I'm not convinced that the amount of money that he's going to be seeking in his weekly wages, or indeed his third-party endorsements and his image rights, are going to be quite at the level that he's perhaps earning at Barcelona. So I think regardless of the buyout clause, it actually brings him into the market for a select number of clubs, at least, particularly those playing in Western Europe. And in that group of clubs, I guess I'm talking about the likes of Manchester City, of Paris Saint-Germain, potentially one of the Italian big teams, Juventus and Inter Milan perhaps, or even a Bayern Munich in the Bundesliga. So I think putting together a weekly paycheck for him and making some sort of agreement over those image rights would be doable for one of those clubs. Of course, none of them will really want to even engage in the type of discussion that might result in the £700 million euro transfer fee or buyout clause that he has available to him. And I'm not convinced that this is all said and done. I know he's come out and he's done his interview to say ultimately he's going to stay at Barcelona, but I wonder if one of those aforementioned clubs that I've just mentioned will actually try and test Barcelona's resolve with a decent transfer fee, because let's face it, he is getting towards the end of his career, and there's an opportunity to cash in on that asset.
Andrew, I want to come back to you. What does all of this entire debacle, tell us about footballers' contracts?
Well, I mean, I think one of the most interesting aspects of this case is actually there's potentially a number of jurisdictions in play. Now, obviously, my understanding is that his contract has written in governing law or Spanish law as the governing law, and obviously the Spanish courts will have jurisdiction over any dispute in relation to that contract. But ultimately also Barcelona, if say he did walk out of the contract based upon his view that he had activated the release lawfully, then Barcelona could obviously bring a complaint to FIFA under Article 17, which obviously relates to players leaving without just cause. So you have this interesting scenario here whereby there's two potential jurisdictions in play, one in relation to the Spanish civil courts and one in relation to FIFA and the FIFA Dispute Resolution Chamber. I suspect the latter would be more preferable in relation to this case, simply because that would lead to a speedier outcome, but also crucially, the club, any club that signed him in the event that he did seek to walk out, would be joint and severally liable in relation to any buyout provision that was determined or deemed to be lawful in the circumstances. And also with the FIFA DRC provisions under Article 17, there's also potential sporting sanctions for both the player and indeed the signing club. So that also adds a layer of negotiating leverage. But I guess one of the key aspects here is that really ideally you want to see consistent governing law and consistent jurisdiction provisions in relation to player contracts.
OK, Rob, I want to talk about UEFA financial fair play regulations. For those who may not be familiar, they mean a club, correct me if I'm wrong, they mean a club can't spend more than they earn, basically in the pursuit of success. In July, the Court of Arbitration for Sport ruled in favour of Manchester City and its appeal against its suspension and actually had its fine lowered. Some people were angry about that decision. What's your take?
Well, you're absolutely right. The financial fair play rules essentially are trying to encourage or rather force clubs to break even. So that is to say they don't spend any more money than they earn. What we also have in that situation is that your owner, the person that owns the club or the body that owns the club, is only permitted to invest a very small amount of additional capital into that club to offset some of those losses. So the furore around Manchester City was essentially that they had inflated some of their commercial and sponsorship deals, that money hadn't come from those sponsor commercial partners. It had actually come from the ownership, and that was where there was a potential breach. Of course, as you say, Court of Arbitration for Sport ruled in favour of Manchester City and said that the fine wasn't proportionate either. I've got to be honest, I was fairly surprised myself at that, which leads me to wonder whether or not UEFA actually hadn't done a sufficient amount of due diligence. We heard a lot, and Andrew mentioned there's something called time barred, whereby what I think CAS essentially said is that the case wasn't brought soon enough, and you can't really sanction somebody for something that was done so far in the past. And that is absolutely going to be on the minds of a number of those elite clubs in Europe. Of course, we're going to have a slight relaxation, I think, of those financial fair play regulations as a consequence of the coronavirus pandemic. So I think UEFA are going to allow a little bit more flexibility. And let's be perfectly honest, we've seen Chelsea very recently flexing their financial muscle in the transfer market and breaking their transfer deal just yesterday with the signing of Havertz from Bayer Leverkusen. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility that other elite clubs in Europe will just look to test the boundaries of that envelope, particularly in the face of the coronavirus pandemic, and really test the resolve of UEFA around the regulations.
Gemma, what's your take? Do you think the Court of Arbitration for Sport's ruling has undermined those financial fair play regulations beyond repair? I mean, can these super rich clubs just do as they please?
Well, we've seen it in the last year that they managed to do their things to sign the best player, and there is a huge difference between these clubs in the Premier League, what Manchester City can sign and the rest can sign, or in Ligue 1, what PSG can do and the rest of the teams. So it has to be this kind of regulation, because otherwise the competition is completely desvirtuated. There's no fair play in the. I don't only mean in the economy, but in the field, in the stadium, and there is a difference that makes this competition, this game, this football game, less interesting than if there is this kind of regulation.
Andrew, one Harvard study looked at football's financial integrity, or lack of it, as it said. It talks about structural financial weakness in football. I want to quote to you here. It says, the sector is dominated by a small elite of clubs, players and owners centred in Europe's top leagues. The thousands of clubs beyond that have little resources, constituting a vast base of have-nots in a financial pyramid. How do you begin to address that in football? Does it even need to be addressed, or is that just the nature of the game?
I think the starting point is it's the nature of the European model of sport, which is obviously different to the US model of sport, which builds in a degree of, inverted commas, fairness in relation to A, how the leagues are structured, but B, in relation to how the best players arising from the college system can be picked up and selected. It's not dominated by the biggest checkbook per se. But at the same time, there are ways and means you can address the issues within European football. Obviously, financial fair play is one of those. There's many who will argue that it's proven to have lacked the teeth that it needs to have to properly and fully regulate the issues you've identified. But there's also ways you can improve and build the mechanisms and the mechanics around training compensation and solidarity payments to ensure that the trickle-down effect is in play and remains intact, because that trickle-down effect is a really important underpinning of the European model of sport, and certainly some would say that that's been pushed to the wayside in recent years, and that needs to be focused on again, because the element of haves and have-nots is not something which makes leagues particularly attractive to broadcasters and sponsors, and it's something that clearly needs to be looked at. But the point of principle is that the European model of sport has always worked on that basis. It just needs to be managed and regulated in the right way.
Rob, I can see you, nodding or perhaps not. What's your take on that?
Well, a lot of the research we've done at Sheffield Business School with one of my co-authors, a chap called Dan Plumley, focuses on competitive balance and competitive integrity. I was interested that the Harvard report said what it did, because if you go back to the very construct of the UEFA financial fair play regulations, they set out to do two things. One was to improve financial sustainability across European club football. I think I would argue that has been achieved. We see many fewer instances of administration, for example, going into football clubs. Much greater number of clubs are surviving and competing now financially. But the other thing they wanted to do was improve competitive balance. And that basically says that we want clubs to be more competitive against each other on the field of play. And that's where financial fair play as a regulation has completely failed, actually, because you now have a group of, let's say, 20 or so clubs that would be considered the super elite. They have, majority of the revenue. Take Barcelona, Real Madrid in Spain, for example, soak up huge amount of the television deal in La Liga. You look at the Premier League, you've got a top six there that are generating 300, 400, 500 million pounds worth of revenue each year. So they are naturally now becoming much, much bigger than certainly their domestic counterparts. And we're starting to see that competitive balance erode right across European competition as well. And that's really dangerous from a broadcasting point of view, because you are pitting together teams that aren't competitive. So ultimately that then will reduce things like broadcast fees, things like sponsorship fees, commercial revenue, and so on. And I think that will damage the stability of football finances across Europe. And I think we're in a place now where we need to start learning a few lessons from the American model of team sport, which is what we essentially refer to in this Harvard report, which is basically unequally distributing things like television revenue and some other bits and pieces to support those so-called smaller teams to be more competitive, both in the transfer market, paying players' wages, and then ultimately on the field of play. The danger, of course, for that, for all of those super elite clubs, is they absolutely don't want it, which is why they were also happy to sign up to the financial fair play regulations in the first place, because it protected their status quo.
Something we have to talk about is the coronavirus pandemic and how that has impacted football as a whole. Gemma, what has the impact been, both on the game, on the business model, and what's the situation with La Liga? How has coronavirus impacted the season and the cash flow?
Well, it has had a huge impact, and we haven't seen it all because we know in Spain, the government has just said that it won't be people going to the stadiums at least until next year. So this is a huge loss for clubs. For example, we were talking about FC Barcelona. They have a stadium that can fill 100,000 people. It's going to be empty for a year, almost, and counting. And about merchandising, there are no tourists, there is no T-shirts being sold, and so on and so on. La Liga, they are quite happy with the decision of Messi not leaving, because this could affect tremendously their TV rights internationally. Having and not having Neymar, Messi, they have already lost the other stars like Neymar and Cristiano Ronaldo. Losing Lionel Messi was an absolutely disaster. And about the football, about the sport, now it's not affecting, because also we still have a lot of people in America still being locked down. So in the TV audiences of La Liga, they said that after March, when they restarted the championship, they have doubled the TV audience in international sites. So they still think they can have a benefit from this for next season. But for the club, it's a disaster. And I also think it's a disaster as well for the players. I was in Lisbon in the final 8, and it's a different sport. It's a different thing. For players, is another way of speaking. I'm not going to say that Barcelona lose 2-8 because there was no fans, but it can bring a player to put the arms down and say, I cannot fight, and they don't have 50,000 people cheering and trying to make them do something else. So it's another sport. I think it affects more football than maybe other sports where the stadiums are smaller and the intensity is different.
OK, I want to go full circle because we are nearing the end of the programme. Andrew, when we're coming back to Lionel Messi, he said he wanted to leave. Now he's not leaving until the end of the season, the next season. How do you think fans will react? I mean, the fact that he wants to leave but isn't.
Yeah, I think they do care. And I think that, I think there's a number of ways of looking at it. I mean, obviously, this is a player who has given 16, 17 years worth of service to this great football club. And ultimately, if he starts performing on the field of play, if he starts scoring goals, and if he shows the commitment that he has said he will show and demonstrate next season, then I suspect he'll quickly be forgiven. And of course, this time next year, he'll be able to activate his right to do as he pleases. And I suspect, the majority of fans would respect that. I suspect there's a lot of commercial aspects in play as well in relation to Barcelona's decision to play hardball this time around. I suspect, Messi is a key part of their commercial program at the very least over the next 12 months. And I suspect that is obviously, a key facet to their thinking. And of course, how they engage with their fans.
Absolutely.
Off the back of his profile.
It does seem that those commercial imperatives do seem to be the bottom line in a lot of this. Yeah. We will have to leave it there for time. I do appreciate all three of you coming on the programme. Thank you for that. Rob Wilson, Gemma Soler and Andrew Nixon. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for more discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is AJ Inside Story. From me, Kim Vinnell, and the whole team here. Bye-bye for now.